My wife and daughter took me to dinner at an upscale restaurant with a financial advisor. They spoke freely in Mandarin, thinking I didn't understand a single word, but then I heard my wife say something that left me stunned. I couldn't believe it. The financial advisor was someone I never expected, and they were plotting to erase me from their lives. But it's okay, I'll make them taste the bitter consequences before their schemes are executed. I'm glad you clicked to hear what happened next. Where are you watching from? Comment your location, and if you speak a language your family doesn't know about, share which one. You're not alone. Transparency note. This narrative is fictional, designed for entertainment and contemplation purposes. Any resemblance to actual persons or situations is purely coincidental, though the themes explored may resonate meaningfully with your own experiences. I sat at a corner table in Hakkasan, watching my wife and daughter across from me through the soft glow of red paper lanterns. The restaurant hummed with quiet wealth. Crystal glasses caught the dim light. White tablecloths stretched across every surface. Around us, conversations blended into a low murmur, punctuated by the clink of chopsticks against porcelain. Diane looked stunning tonight. At 58, she'd kept herself immaculate hair, that perfect shade of chestnut brown skin, smooth from expensive creams, designer dress, hugging her frame just right. She raised her wine-glass diamonds, catching light from her bracelet. The bracelet I'd bought her for our 15th anniversary. Stephanie sat beside her mother, 29, and polished like a magazine cover. Yale had done that. Turned my little girl into this elegant stranger in a black cocktail dress who checked her phone between courses. "This place is gorgeous," Stephanie said, scanning the room. "How did you find it, Mom?" Diane smiled. "Christopher recommended it." There it was. Christopher, the business partner. The man I'd heard about exactly 3 times in 2 months, always in passing, always with that same careful tone. I sipped my Qingtao and said nothing. The waiter arrived with our Peking duck, presenting it with ceremony, crispy skin, glistening thin pancakes, stacked like promises. Diane and Stephanie cooed appropriately. I nodded my thanks, and then they switched. Stephanie's voice dropped to Mandarin. "Mom, are you sure he doesn't know anything?" My hand didn't shake. I kept my eyes on the duck, reaching for a pancake. Diane replied in the same language, smooth and practiced. "Don't worry. The old fool has no idea what we're saying." Old fool. I spread hoisin sauce with steady fingers. 20 years of marriage, a daughter I'd held in the delivery room, and this is what I'd become to them. Stephanie continued in Mandarin. "Are the nursing home papers ready?" "Next Wednesday," Diane said, taking a delicate bite. "Wednesday, 5 days from now." "Then we'll be free," Diane added. I took another sip of beer. The bottle was cold, solid, real. Everything else felt like it was sliding sideways. Stephanie leaned closer to her mother, still speaking Chinese. "Christopher says everything is arranged." My mind clicked through possibilities. Christopher, the nursing home, papers ready Wednesday, everything arranged. They weren't just talking, they were planning. A waiter passed, carrying a whole steamed fish, its eye staring blankly. I knew how it felt. "Dad," Stephanie switched back to English. "You're quiet tonight." I arranged my face into something mild, pleasant. "Just enjoying the food, sweetheart. This duck is incredible." "It really is." Diane reached across and squeezed my hand. Her skin was cold. "I'm so glad we could do this. Family dinner. Just the 3 of us." Just the 3 of us. 2 against 1. "Me too," I said. They smiled at me. I smiled back. And all the while my mind raced through years I hadn't thought about in decades. Shanghai, 1991 to 2001. 10 years learning Mandarin the hard way, total immersion construction sites, language schools. By 2000, I was dreaming in Chinese. I told Diane about Shanghai when we met in 2003. The projects, the skyline, the experience. But I'd never mentioned the language. Not directly. She'd asked once, "Did you learn Chinese?" And I'd shrugged, said I knew enough to get by. Why hadn't I corrected her? Maybe some instinct had warned me. Maybe I'd wanted to keep one part of my past private. Maybe I'd wanted to see who she really was when she thought I couldn't understand. Over 20 years, it had never come up. Until tonight. Stephanie asked her mother casually in Mandarin, "Has Dad's memory gotten worse lately?" Diane nodded, responding in Chinese. "Yes. Last week he forgot where his wallet was. Perfect timing." I hadn't forgotten my wallet. I'd left it in my car. On purpose. Testing myself, checking if my mind was still sharp. Diane had been watching, taking notes, building a case. The restaurant's background music shifted, a traditional erhu melody, melancholy and thin. A couple at the next table laughed. Their joy felt obscene. I reached for another pancake, but my appetite was gone. Still, I went through the motions. Wrapped the duck, added scallions, took a bite. "Douglas!" Diane's eyes held something I couldn't read. "Are you feeling all right? You look tired." "I'm fine, just thinking about that project I finished last month." "You should rest more," she said softly. "You're not getting any younger." Stephanie's whisper in Mandarin barely rose above the music. "Do you think he'll resist?" Diane's voice in Chinese carried absolute certainty. "No. He trusts me too much." She was right. I had trusted her. Completely. Foolishly. I looked at Stephanie, really looked at her. When had she learned Mandarin Spanish in high school business at Yale? Where did Chinese fit unless this had been planned for a long time? Long enough to learn a language? Long enough to build a conspiracy? My chest felt tight. Not pain, just pressure. Stephanie checked her phone, tapping quickly, texting someone. Christopher, probably. I finished my beer. The bottle made a soft sound when I set it down. "Another beer, sir." The waiter appeared. "Yes, please." Diane and Stephanie exchanged a look. Quick. Meaningful. Diane murmured in Mandarin, "Don't let him drink too much." Then louder in English, "Honey, are you sure you know how beer affects your sleep?" "I'll be fine." The waiter brought my beer. I took a long drink. Around us, Hakkasan continued its expensive hum. A cork popped somewhere. Someone ordered soufflé. A woman in red threw her head back, laughing, earrings catching light. Normal people having a normal Friday night. I thought about my normal life. 2.8 million in retirement savings. A house in Pacific Heights worth $4.5 million. 20 years building it. A wife I'd loved. A daughter I'd adored. When had it gone wrong? Diane was speaking to Stephanie in Mandarin again. "Remember to bring the documents." "Wednesday?" Stephanie asked in Chinese. "Yes, 7 o'clock." Diane confirmed. Wednesday at 7, that's when they'd make their move. I had 5 days. The duck sat heavy in my stomach. I looked at the paintings on the wall, traditional Chinese landscapes, mountains disappearing into mist. I'd always loved those paintings. Now they just looked like people trying to escape. Stephanie laughed at something on her phone. "Christopher says," she began in English, then caught herself, glanced at me, and switched to Mandarin. "Christopher says he'll see us this weekend." Diane nodded, responding in Chinese. "Good." I smiled. "What's funny, sweetheart?" "Oh, just something from work. Too easy." She'd always been a terrible liar. Or maybe she'd just never needed to be good at it before. Dessert was offered. Diane ordered lychee sorbet. Stephanie wanted nothing. I asked for green tea. The tea came in a small ceramic pot, steam rising. Stephanie said quietly in Mandarin, "We should hurry this along." Diane's voice in Chinese was patient. "Don't rush. We need to act natural." Act natural. Yes, they were very good at that. I poured tea and watched them watching me. Diane's smile never wavered. Stephanie's fingers tapped her wine glass, nervous, guilty, but her face stayed pleasant. I thought about the moment I'd met Diane at that charity auction in 2003. Blue dress, filling the room with her laugh. When I'd said architect, her eyes had lit up. We'd married 6 months later. Too fast, my sister Margaret had warned. You don't know her. But I'd been 51 and lonely, and she'd been 41 and beautiful, and sometimes you just want to believe in good things. The check arrived. I paid without looking at the total. What did it matter? It was all going to be theirs soon anyway, according to them. Stephanie stood, saying in Mandarin, "This restaurant is really nice." Diane gathered her purse, responding in Chinese. "Next time we should bring Christopher." Next time, as if there would be one. We walked outside. I held the door, helped Diane with her coat, hugged Stephanie goodbye on the sidewalk, breathing in expensive perfume I'd probably paid for. "Love you too, Dad," she said. Had she ever? They drove away in Diane's Mercedes. I watched the taillights disappear into Friday night traffic. A cable car rattled past tourists hanging off the sides, laughing into the wind. I walked to my Tesla in the parking garage, sat in the driver's seat, didn't start the engine. Old fool. Wednesday at 7. Everything arranged. I thought about calling Margaret, my lawyer, the police. Instead, I made a different decision. If they wanted to play games, fine. But they'd forgotten something important about me. I didn't just design buildings. I designed solutions. I looked at problems from every angle. I planned for contingencies. And I'd learned a long time ago in a city on the other side of the world that the best way to win a game was to let your opponent think you didn't know you were playing. I started the car. As I drove home through San Francisco's glittering night, past the ferry building lit up like a crown, past the Bay Bridge strung with lights like diamond necklaces, I thought about Shanghai. About skyscrapers rising from nothing. About the patience it took to build something that would last, and the patience it would take to dismantle what they'd built against me. 5 days until Wednesday. 5 days to find out how deep this went. 5 days to become something they'd never expected, a fool who knew he was being played. I pulled into the driveway of our house. Our house. $4.5 million of Victorian architecture in Pacific Heights. I'd renovated it myself, designed every detail, turned it from a wreck into a showpiece. Diane was already inside. I could see lights on in the living room through the tall windows. I sat in the car for one more moment. Then I got out, locked the door, and walked toward my home. The duck was sitting heavy in my stomach. The beer had left a bitter taste in my mouth. And somewhere deep in my chest, something that had been sleeping for 20 years was finally waking up. The house was too quiet. I'd kissed Diane goodnight, like nothing had changed, and climbed into bed beside her. She'd fallen asleep immediately, the sleep of someone with a clear conscience or no conscience at all. I'd lain there in the dark, listening to her breathe. At 2:47 a.m., I gave up pretending. The office down the hall was cold. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the desk lamp. My laptop hummed to life, the Apple logo glowing like a lone star. Old fool. Everything arranged. Wednesday at 7. I typed in the URL for First Republic Bank. Two-factor authentication. Login. The numbers didn't make sense. Checking account, $89,247.33. I couldn't be right. I kept a minimum of $500,000 in checking. Savings account $251,018.87. No, I'd had $2.3 million in savings. Total current balance $340,266.20. Total previous balance $3,242,168.62. Difference $2,901,900, 2.42. Nearly $3 million. Gone. I scrolled through the transaction history. Normal expenses, utilities, groceries, the gardener. Then I saw them. February the 3rd, 2024. Wire transfer, $950,000. Recipient SW Ventures, LLC. Reference investment capital. D. Warren authorization, February 10th, 2024. Wire transfer, $720,000. Recipient account number XXX-445-8392, International Reference Portfolio Diversification. February 17th, 2024. Wire transfer, $830,000. Recipient S. Warren. Personal account reference gift transfer. And scattered throughout January and February, smaller transfers adding up to just over $300,000. My authorization. Every single one claimed my authorization. I'd authorized exactly none of them. I clicked on the February 3rd transfer. The digital signature at the bottom looked like mine. Same scrawl I'd used for 40 years. But I'd never signed this document. The February 10th transfer showed an international routing number Cayman Islands, the kind of account where money disappeared into offshore fog. The February 17th transfer was cleanest a simple gift to my daughter. Except I hadn't gifted Stephanie $830,000. Her trust fund wasn't due until her 30th birthday in September. I leaned back in the leather chair. The desk lamp cast shadows across financial statements that read like an autopsy report. Here's where the money lived. Here's where it died. My phone said 2:53 a.m. In 6 hours, Diane would wake up, make her French press coffee, and ask me how I'd slept. I thought about that moment at Hakkasan when she'd squeezed my hand. I'm so glad we could do this. Had the money already been gone while we ate Peking duck? And she smiled at me. Wednesday at 7, 5 days from now. But they'd started months ago. February 3rd was 7 weeks back. 2 months of systematic theft while I'd walked around blind and trusting. The old fool has no idea what we're saying. She'd been right. Until tonight. I logged into my brokerage account at Charles Schwab. The portfolio I'd managed carefully for decades. The balance loaded $247,394.67. It should have been $1.8 million. I didn't need to check the transaction history. I already knew more transfers, more forged signatures, more money flowing toward whatever Christopher had arranged. Christopher says everything is arranged. Yeah, I bet he did. I sat in that pool of lamplight in the office I'd designed with built-in bookshelves and crown molding, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not my heart. That would have been cleaner. This was the sound of trust shattering. 20 years of marriage. A daughter I'd raised. And they'd robbed me blind while I'd smiled at family dinners and paid for Stephanie's Yale tuition and bought Diane that diamond bracelet she wore tonight. The bracelet I'd paid for. With money they were stealing. I thought about calling someone. Margaret, my lawyer, the police, but it was 2:58 a.m., and what I needed wasn't just to report a crime, I needed to understand it. The scope, the mechanism, the players. I needed someone who could trace money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. Someone who understood financial fraud from the inside out. Someone I could trust absolutely. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Fog was rolling in from the bay, turning streetlights into soft halos. My wife and daughter had stolen nearly $3 million from me over 2 months, and in 5 days they planned to lock me in a nursing home so they could take the rest. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I knew exactly who to call. Martin Fisher answered on the second ring. Douglas, what's wrong? I'd known Martin for 30 years, met him on an Oakland project back when we were both climbing our respective ladders. He'd handled the books for 3 of my biggest developments. When he'd retired 5 years ago to focus on forensic accounting consulting, we'd stayed close. I need your help. Something's happened. Hold on. A door closed. Okay, talk to me. I told him everything. Hakkasan, the Mandarin conversation, the nursing home plan, the $2.8 million gone. Martin didn't interrupt. Send me your login credentials, he said finally. Encrypted email. I'm accessing your accounts remotely. It's 3 a.m. Douglas, if what you're telling me is accurate, we don't have time for business hours. Do it now. I sent the encrypted email. Done. Got it. Give me 5 minutes. Typing sounds came through the phone, fast, professional. Jesus Christ, he muttered. What? SW Ventures, LLC. Delaware registration filed February 1st. More typing. Stephanie Warren listed as managing member. Registered agent is a Wilmington law firm standard corporate anonymity setup. My daughter's name, on a shell company. 2 weeks before the first wire transfer. The international transfer routes through 3 intermediary banks before landing in the Caymans. Martin continued. Professional work. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. Christopher. Probably. But Stephanie being on SW Ventures means she's directly involved. You don't accidentally become the managing member of an LLC. The words hit hard. I'd wanted to believe Stephanie was manipulated, but registering a company in your own name that was deliberate. Can you trace where the money went? I can try. The LLC has a bank account somewhere. The Cayman transfer is trickier, but there are ways. Give me until this afternoon. I'll put together a preliminary report. Martin, don't thank me yet. Douglas, listen. If they've taken this much and they're planning to institutionalize you, they're not done. Wednesday is 5 days away. That's the end game. We need to move fast. I know. One more thing. Check your laptop email archives. If Diane's been communicating with Christopher, there might be evidence. Check for hidden folders, anything that looks off. Do it now, then get some sleep. I'll call you at noon. He hung up. I opened my laptop and searched through email folders. There, a folder labeled archive_2024_backup. Innocent enough, deliberate enough. I clicked it open. 63 emails between Diane and cblake.consulting@protonmail.com. Christopher Blake. The subject lines RE timeline confirmation, RE account access verification, RE Wednesday schedule, RE final transfer amounts. I opened the first one, January 8th. Christopher, Douglas asked about the December statement today. I told him it was a bank error. He believed me. We need to move faster. D. Another. January 22nd. The SW Ventures paperwork is filed. Stephanie signed everything yesterday. She thinks it's for her trust fund restructuring. She has no idea. D. One more. February 16th. Tomorrow's transfer will be the largest. After that, we only need the house and the Schwab account. Wednesday gives us everything. Christopher, I can't wait to be done with this. 20 years of pretending. D. I closed the laptop. The fog outside had thickened until I couldn't see the house across the street. This wasn't just theft. This was premeditated conspiracy that had been building for months. 20 years of pretending. Every kiss, every anniversary, every time she'd said, I love you. All of it lies. I sat in that office, surrounded by the life I'd built, and realized I'd been living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. The question wasn't whether to fight back anymore. The question was how completely I could dismantle what they'd built against me. I sat in my office as the fog pressed against the windows, and my mind did what it always did. When the present became unbearable, it traveled backward. Shanghai, 1991. I was 49 years old the first time I saw it. The city was a construction site, pretending to be a metropolis, half-finished skyscrapers rising from muddy lots. Cranes blocking out the sun jackhammers, providing a constant industrial heartbeat. Pudong was still mostly farmland. The Oriental Pearl Tower was just a foundation and a promise. I'd gone there chasing an opportunity to help design the next generation of commercial buildings in a city about to explode into the 21st century. My firm in San Francisco was established but small. I needed something bigger. Warren Capital started in a rented office in the French Concession, with me a translator whose English was questionable and a dream that probably should have stayed a dream. It would have too if not for Edward Brown. We met at a business mixer at the Peace Hotel in October 1991. I was nursing a whiskey, trying to figure out how to pitch my services to developers who didn't trust foreigners. He was standing by the window overlooking the Bund, watching the Huangpu River slide past. "You're the American architect," he said in perfect English, extending his hand. "Edward Brown. I've been reading about your work." "Douglas Warren." "I didn't know anyone actually read those articles," he smiled. "When you're looking for someone who understands both Western design and Chinese practicality, you read everything." Edward was 41 then, Chinese-American, born in San Francisco's Chinatown, but educated at Berkeley. His family had money, old money from trading companies that had survived both the Cultural Revolution and the opening up by being smart and quiet. He'd made a fortune in Hong Kong real estate and was now looking at mainland China the way prospectors once looked at California goldfields. "I need a partner," he said over our third whiskey. "Someone who can design buildings that look good to Western investors but function in Chinese reality. Someone hungry enough to take risks, but experienced enough not to be stupid about it." "That's a very specific job description." "I'm a very specific person." He pulled out a business card. "Think about it. Call me when you're ready to build something that matters." I called him the next morning. Warren Brown Development was born 3 weeks later over soup dumplings in a restaurant that doesn't exist anymore. We spent the next decade building office towers, residential complexes, mixed-use developments that tried to bridge the gap between what Shanghai was and what it was becoming. But more than that, we built friendship. Edward taught me how Shanghai actually worked beneath its surface, the unwritten rules, the relationships that mattered more than contracts, the patience required when bureaucracy moved like molasses, and the speed necessary when opportunity opened for exactly 5 minutes before closing forever. And he taught me Mandarin. "You can't do business here if you sound like a tourist," he said 6 months in. "Learn the language, really learn it." "I'm 50 years old. My brain doesn't—" "Your brain works fine. You're just scared. Get over it." So I did. Language schools 3 mornings a week. Tutors in the evenings. Conversations with construction workers who laughed at my terrible tones, but corrected me patiently. Reading Chinese newspapers with a dictionary stumbling through characters until they started making sense. By 1995, I could negotiate contracts in Mandarin. By 1998, I was dreaming in Chinese. By 2000, workers on our sites forgot I wasn't Chinese until they looked at my face. The language opened doors I hadn't known existed, and on construction sites, when workers thought the foreign boss couldn't understand them, I heard everything, the shortcuts they wanted to take. The problems they were hiding, the brilliant solutions they were too afraid to suggest directly. Knowledge is power. Hidden knowledge is a weapon. Edward and I built 17 major projects in Shanghai between 1991 and 2001. The Huaihai Road Tower, the Jing'an Complex, the Lujiazui Financial Center, our crowning achievement, a 40-story glass and steel monument that still stands today. We made real money, the kind that changed lives. But more than the money, more than the buildings, I had a brother. We traveled together, Beijing, Guangzhou, Chengdu, following opportunities across China. We celebrated holidays, both American and Chinese, usually with too much baijiu and terrible karaoke. When his mother died in Hong Kong, I was on the first plane. When I got divorced from my first wife in 1994, a marriage that had been dying slowly for years, Edward flew to San Francisco and sat with me for a week. "You'll meet someone better," he told me, finally pouring whiskey in my apartment. "Someone who deserves you. I'm 53 and tired. You're 53 and just getting started. Trust me." He was right about a lot of things. Not that one, as it turned out. In 2001, Edward's father had a stroke. The family business needed him back in Hong Kong full-time. We both knew what it meant. "The partnership's been good," he said over dinner at our usual spot in Xintiandi. "Better than good. But family is family." "I understand. Do you want to keep Warren Brown going without me?" "No. This was ours. If you're leaving, the company should end. Clean break." We dissolved Warren Brown Development that fall, divided assets fairly, kept the friendship intact. I stayed in Shanghai another few months, then moved back to California in early 2002. I was 60 years old, newly wealthy, and starting over. That's when I met Diane. Edward had kept in touch emails at first, then video calls as technology improved. Every few months, we'd talk for hours. He'd built a real estate empire in Hong Kong. I'd established myself as a boutique architect in San Francisco, taking projects that interested me. "You sound lonely," he said once about a year into my marriage. "I'm fine. Douglas, I've known you for 23 years. You're not fine." But I'd convinced myself I was. Diane was elegant, charming, interested in my work. Stephanie was sweet. Life was comfortable. I'd stopped mentioning my Mandarin fluency. It hadn't come up naturally, and after a while it just became another fact I didn't share. Like my first marriage, like the Shanghai projects that hadn't worked out. You bury things. Tell yourself it's for simplicity's sake. Then 20 years pass, and you're sitting in your office at 5:15 in the morning, staring at emails from your wife to her lover, and you realize the things you buried were the things that could have saved you. I picked up my phone. Edward answered on the third ring. "Douglas, it's 5 in the morning there. What's wrong?" His voice, steady, familiar, the sound of someone who knew me when I was still building instead of surviving, broke something open in my chest. "I need help," I said. "I need you." "Tell me." So I did. Everything. Hakkasan, the Mandarin conversation, the missing money, Martin's call, the emails, Wednesday's deadline, 20 years of marriage to someone I'd never actually known. Edward listened without interrupting. I could hear Hong Kong harbor in the background, ships, traffic, the hum of a city that never stopped moving. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The Mandarin saved you," he said finally. "After all these years, it saved you." "Yeah." Douglas, listen to me. When someone builds something against you, you have to be smarter than they are. More patient. More thorough. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can. You designed buildings in a foreign country when everyone said you'd fail. You learned Mandarin at 50. You built something from nothing. This is just another project. Understand? It's not just a project. It's my life. Exactly. So treat it like your most important design ever. Plan every detail. Anticipate every problem. Build your victory the same way you built those towers, one solid piece at a time. I closed my eyes. Outside, the fog was beginning to thin. Dawn was coming. I need you here, I said. Not on the phone, here. I know. I'm already pulling up flight schedules. First flight I can get is Monday evening Hong Kong time, lands San Francisco Tuesday morning. That work? Yes. Douglas, we're going to destroy them, properly, completely. The way we used to demolish old buildings in Shanghai before putting up something better. I don't want revenge. I just want... You want justice, I know. We'll get you that too. See you Tuesday. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone as the first light touched the fog, turning it from gray to pearl. Somewhere in this city, Diane was sleeping peacefully. Stephanie was probably texting Christopher. Martin was digging through financial records. And Edward was booking a flight. I thought about that first night at the Peace Hotel, looking out at a city that was half promise and half chaos. Call me when you're ready to build something that matters, Edward had said. 33 years later, I was ready to build again. Not a tower this time. A reckoning. Sunday afternoon arrived with fog and silence. Diane had gone to brunch with friends, or so she said. Probably meeting Christopher. I'd smiled and told her to have fun the same way I'd been smiling for 2 days, while my world collapsed behind my teeth. At 2:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Email from Martin. Subject line, preliminary report. I sat down at my desk before opening it. The attachment was a PDF, 32 pages. I clicked it open. Confidential forensic financial analysis. Subject Douglas Warren. Asset irregularities. Analyst Martin Fisher, CPA CFE. Date March 17, 2024. I skipped the introduction and went straight to Section 3, Subject Identification. Christopher Blake alias, real name Christian Blackwell. There was a photo, professional headshot probably pulled from some old business website. Same man I'd never met but had heard about for 2 months. Dark hair graying at the temples, expensive suit, smile that probably cost someone a fortune in dental work. Martin's notes continued: Christian Blackwell, age 47, last known residence San Francisco, California. FBI wanted for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud across multiple jurisdictions. Active warrant issued November 2022. Wanted by the FBI. The man Diane was planning my future with was a federal fugitive. Blackwell has operated under at least 6 known aliases over the past 12 years. Christopher Blake, Christopher Stevens, Chris Baldwin, Christian Blake, Stephen Christopher, and C.J. Blackwood. 6 names, 12 years. How many victims? Martin had anticipated my question. Subject targets: wealthy women, typically divorcees or widows aged 45 to 70, through strategic relationship building with family members, often adult children. Establishes trust through manufactured business credentials, gains access to financial accounts, then systematically drains assets through shell companies and offshore transfers. I read that paragraph 3 times, through family members. Stephanie. He'd gotten to Stephanie first, not Diane. The timeline clicked into place. 6 months ago, maybe longer, Christopher had met my daughter, charmed her, convinced her he was legitimate, then used her to get to Diane. Or maybe both had been targets from the start. Martin's report continued with known pattern analysis. Blackwell's methodology follows consistent structure: Phase 1, target identification, 2 to 4 months. Identifies wealthy targets through social media, charity events, business networks. Stephanie's yoga studio probably, or that gallery opening she'd mentioned in January. Phase 2, relationship building, 3 to 6 months. Develops romantic relationship with target or target's family member, Establishes credibility through fabricated business success. Christopher, the business consultant. Christopher, who Diane mentioned casually, always with that careful tone. Phase 3. Financial access 1 to 3 months. Gains access to accounts through authorized user additions, power of attorney, or identity theft using obtained personal information. My signatures on those wire transfers, except they weren't mine at all. Phase 4. Asset extraction 2 to 6 weeks. Rapidly drains accounts through wire transfers to shell companies' offshore accounts or accomplice accounts. Wednesday at 7, the nursing home. The manufactured dementia narrative. Phase 5. Disappearance 24 to 48 hours. Vanishes completely, often leaving country immediately after final transfer. Singapore. The flight Martin had mentioned. Martin had included verified previous victims. Pattern confirmation. Investigation has identified 4 previous instances following identical methodology. Victim 1, 2012, Pacific Northwest, divorced female, age 58. Loss $685,000. Offshore transfer subject fled to Philippines. Victim 2, 2015, Seattle area, widowed male, age 64. Loss $520,000. Shell company transfer subject fled to Singapore. Victim 3, 2018, Denver area, divorced female, age 52. Loss $890,000. Multiple shell companies subject fled to Hong Kong. Victim 4, 2020, Los Angeles area, widowed male, age 67. Loss $730,000. Trust fund manipulation, offshore transfers subject fled to Vancouver. 4 victims, 4 cities, 4 lives destroyed. Total losses $2.825 million, about the same amount missing from my accounts. I sat back in my chair. Christopher Christian was a professional. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was his career. He'd been doing this for over a decade, leaving wreckage across the western United States, always one step ahead of law enforcement. And my wife and daughter had invited him into our lives. Had they known, Diane's emails suggested she was a willing participant. But Stephanie, that January 22nd email, said she thought SW Ventures was for trust fund restructuring. Maybe she'd been manipulated too, or maybe she was a better liar than I'd given her credit for. Martin's final paragraph. Recommendation: immediate law enforcement contact advised. Subject is dangerous through systematic financial destruction and documented flight risk. Wednesday appears to be planned extraction date. Time is critical. I closed the laptop. Christopher was a professional criminal. Diane was his accomplice. Stephanie was, what victim, co-conspirator. Some uncomfortable middle ground, where she'd convinced herself that stealing from her father was somehow justified. Did it matter? They'd still taken $2.8 million. They were still planning to lock me away Wednesday. They were still treating me like an obstacle to be removed rather than a human being who'd loved them. Professional criminal or not, the result was the same. I was being erased from my own life. Not anymore. My phone sat on the desk beside the closed laptop. I had Martin's report. I had Diane's emails. I had Edward arriving Tuesday. What I needed next was to understand exactly how deep this went, and I knew where to look. I opened Martin's report again, scrolling to Section 4, Co-conspirator Analysis. The header made my stomach turn. Diane Warren, active participant. Email evidence demonstrates subject Diane Warren possesses full knowledge of fraudulent transfers and actively coordinates timing amounts and methodologies with Christian Blackwell. Communication pattern suggests co-equal partnership rather than manipulation. Co-equal partnership. Not a victim. A partner. Martin had attached screenshots from Diane's hidden emails. I'd seen some Friday night, but he'd found more. January 15th, 2024. Diane to Christopher. The first transfer needs to look legitimate. SW Ventures should appear clean standard, LLC proper registration. Can you handle the Delaware filing January 18th, 2024? Christopher to Diane Delaware filing complete. Stephanie signed as managing member yesterday. She believes it's for her trust fund restructuring. The girl has no idea. February 2nd, 2024. Diane to Christopher. Tomorrow's transfer is $950,000. I've already planted the bank error story if Douglas notices. After this one, we're past the point of no return. February 9th, 2024. Christopher to Diane Cayman account is ready. $720,000 moves tomorrow at 2 p.m. Make sure Douglas is out of the house. I remembered February 10th. Diane had insisted I meet Margaret for lunch. You never see your sister anymore, she'd said. While I was in Oakland eating sandwiches with Margaret, Christopher was draining $720,000 from my account. February 16th, 2024. Diane to Christopher Stephanie's account receives $830,000 tomorrow. After this, we only need the house equity and remaining Schwab balance. Wednesday gives us everything. Martin had highlighted an exchange from March 10th. Christopher to Diane's Singapore flight is booked. Departure Friday night. By the time anyone realizes what happened, I'll be gone. Diane to Christopher. What about me and Stephanie? Christopher to Diane. You stay for appearances. Play the shocked wife. Maybe he really did have dementia. 6 months later, sell the house, close the estate, and meet me in Bali. Bali. 6 months of playing grieving widow, then disappearing to Southeast Asia with my money. Martin's notes on SW Ventures Corporation registered January 30th, 2024. Stephanie Warren listed as managing member. Corporate bank account opened February 1st, Wells Fargo, San Francisco. Single deposit $950,000, February 3rd. Funds transferred same day to Hong Kong. Current balance $0. Stephanie had signed documents, put her name on the company, opened the bank account. Whether she understood fully or not, she'd taken active steps. I scrolled to another section, Future Action Timeline. Friday, March the 22nd. Subject mentions gala in multiple communications. Context unclear, but timing suggests significance. Friday, 5 days after Wednesday's nursing home plan. I searched Diane's emails for gala. 3 results. March 5th, Diane to Christopher. The Fairmont Gala is Friday the 22nd. Perfect timing right after we have everything secured. March 12th, Christopher to Diane. I'll give a speech at the gala about family values and caring for aging parents. The irony is delicious. March 14th, Diane to Christopher. See you at the gala Friday. Wear the blue suit. The Fairmont. Friday the 22nd. A gala where Christopher would speak about family values after stealing everything I owned. They were planning a victory lap. My phone buzzed. Text from Diane. Can we talk Monday? I miss you. I stared at those words. I miss you. 20 years of marriage, and it had come to this text messages designed to maintain the illusion while she planned my destruction. I didn't respond. Wednesday was the nursing home. Friday was their celebration. And I had 4 days to decide what I was going to do about it. My phone lit up again. Douglas, are you okay? Please respond. I turned the phone face down. She'd know soon enough if I was okay. Monday morning, I drove across the Bay Bridge to Oakland. Margaret had called 3 times since Saturday's short messages asking if I was okay. If I needed anything, her voice carrying that older sister concern she'd perfected over 75 years of worrying about me. I'd texted back Sunday night, "Can I come by Monday morning? Need to talk." Her response came within seconds, doors open, coffee's on. Margaret lived in a craftsman bungalow in Rockridge, the kind of house that had appreciated so much over 40 years that she could have sold it and retired to Hawaii if she'd wanted to. But she'd raised her kids there, buried her husband from there, and had no intention of leaving until they carried her out. I parked on the street and walked up the familiar path. Before I could knock, the door opened. "You look terrible," Margaret said. "Good morning to you, too." She pulled me into a hug, brief, fierce, the kind that said, "I know something's wrong, and I'm here." Then she stepped back and studied my face with those sharp brown eyes that had always seen through every lie I'd ever tried to tell her. "Coffee or something stronger?" "Coffee. It's 10 in the morning." "That's not a no." She led me through the house to her kitchen, where sunlight poured through windows overlooking a garden that had somehow survived decades of benign neglect. "Sit. Talk." I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd played cards as kids, where I'd told her about my first divorce, where she'd held my hand after our parents died. Some furniture accumulates history until it becomes more memory than wood. Margaret poured 2 mugs of coffee and sat across from me waiting. So I told her. Everything. Hakkasan. The Mandarin conversation. The missing $2.8 million. Christopher's real identity. Diane's emails. The nursing home plan. Wednesday's deadline. She listened without interrupting her face, shifting from concern to shock to something harder. The expression she'd worn when her husband's business partner had tried to cheat them. The look that meant someone had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I saw them," she said finally. "What?" "Diane and Christopher. 6 months ago. September, I think." She stood up and retrieved her phone from the counter. "I was at Mama's in North Beach with some friends. Diane was there with a man I didn't recognize. They were intimate, holding hands across the table. The way you look at someone when you're not just having dinner." My chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I talked myself out of it." She sat back down, scrolling through her phone. "I thought maybe it was innocent. A business colleague, a friend. I didn't want to be the paranoid sister who assumed the worst, and honestly, I was afraid you'd be angry at me for spying." "I wouldn't have been angry. I know that now, but at the time," she shook her head. "I took pictures, just in case. I told myself if it was nothing, I'd delete them. If it was something, at least I'd have evidence." She turned her phone toward me. The first photo showed Diane and Christopher at a corner table, candlelight between them. Diane's hand on his, both of them leaning close, smiling like people who shared secrets. "There are 7 more," Margaret said quietly. I swiped through them. Each image was worse than the last. Diane touching Christopher's face. Christopher's arm around her shoulders as they left the restaurant. The 2 of them standing on the sidewalk, kissing like teenagers. The timestamp on the last photo, September 23rd, 2023, 6 months ago. This had been going on for at least 6 months. "I'm sorry," Margaret said. "I should have told you immediately." "No, you did what you thought was right." I stared at the photos, these frozen moments of betrayal. "Can you send these to me?" "Already done. Just sent them to your email." I looked up at her. "Thank you." "Douglas, there's more." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Over the past few months, Diane has been saying things about you." "What things?" "Memory problems, confusion, little comments at family gatherings about how you've been forgetting things, getting dates mixed up, repeating yourself." She met my eyes. "I didn't think much of it at the time. We're all getting older. But now, with what you've told me, she was building a narrative. Exactly. Making sure everyone thought your mind was going so that when Wednesday came, and she suddenly needed to put you in a nursing home, no one would question it. I thought about all the times over the past months when Diane had mentioned something I'd supposedly forgotten. You said you had lunch with Robert last week. I hadn't. Remember you told me about that project in Nob Hill? I'd never mentioned any such project. Honey, we talked about this yesterday. We absolutely had not. Each time I'd second-guessed myself. Maybe my memory really was slipping. Maybe I had said those things and forgotten. That's what she'd wanted. To make me doubt myself. There's something else, Margaret said. Last week Diane called me. Said she was planning something special for Friday, a gala at the Fairmont. Some charity event. She invited me, specifically said it would mean a lot to have family there. The gala, I said quietly. You know about it? It's in Diane's emails. Friday the 22nd. Christopher's going to give a speech about family values and caring for aging parents. The words tasted bitter. 2 days after they put me in a nursing home, they're going to celebrate at a gala. Margaret's face went hard. Over my dead body. I'm not going to let it get that far. What's your plan? I have a forensic accountant tracing the money. I have an old friend arriving from Hong Kong tomorrow, Edward Brown, you remember him from Shanghai. The one you built all those buildings with. That's him. He's bringing a lawyer who specializes in fraud cases. We're going to document everything, then decide whether to go to the police or... I trailed off. Or what? I don't know yet. Part of me wants to expose them publicly. At the gala. In front of everyone they invited. Margaret nodded slowly. That's the Douglas I remember. The one who didn't just win, he made sure everyone knew he'd won. Is that wrong? Wrong? They stole $3 million from you and planned to lock you away like you were already dead. She reached across and gripped my hand. You do whatever you need to do. And if you need backup, I'm there. Margaret. I mean it. Friday night, the Fairmont, wherever this ends, I'm there. Diane made this family business when she invited me to that gala. Now she gets to deal with actual family. I squeezed her hand back. Thank you. We sat there for a moment in her sunny kitchen, two siblings who'd survived 7 decades of life's complications together. Are you going to the gala? I asked finally. Are you? I don't know yet. Depends on what Edward and the lawyer say. But if I do go, I looked at the photos on her phone still displayed on the screen. If I go, I'm not going to play nice. Good. Margaret stood up and refilled our coffee mugs. You know what Mom used to say about fights? If you're going to fight, fight to win. Exactly. So you fight to win, little brother. And I'll be right there with you. I stayed another hour going over details, showing her Martin's report on my phone, letting her read some of Diane's emails. With each new piece of evidence, Margaret's anger grew colder and more focused, the kind of anger that didn't explode, but calculated. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Edward arrives tomorrow. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. at SFO. Bring him by for dinner Tuesday night. I want to meet this man who's flying across the Pacific to help you. I will. She hugged me again at the door. Douglas, don't let them make you doubt yourself. You're not losing your mind. You're not getting old and confused. You're just finally seeing what was always there. I know. Do you, because 20 years of lies can make you question everything. But I've known you your entire life, and you're the sharpest 72-year-old I know. Don't forget that. I drove back to San Francisco with 8 photos on my phone and Margaret's words in my head. Tuesday, Edward would arrive. Wednesday, they planned to institutionalize me. Friday, they planned to celebrate, but plans change. And I was very good at redesigning structures that no longer served their purpose. Tuesday morning, I stood in the International Arrivals Hall at SFO, watching passengers stream through automatic doors, business travelers, families, reuniting students, hauling oversized backpacks. Then I saw him. Edward Brown emerged, pushing a carry-on dressed in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, looking exactly like he had 2 years ago in Hong Kong. Maybe a few more gray hairs, maybe a few more lines around his eyes, but the same steady presence. Our eyes met. He smiled, not the polite smile you give acquaintances, but the real one reserved for people who'd seen you at your worst and stayed anyway. "You look terrible," he said, pulling me into a brief hug. "That's what Margaret said." "Margaret's right." He stepped back, studying my face. "When's the last time you slept?" "Friday, I think. Real sleep anyway." "We'll fix that. But first coffee. And food. You're going to need your strength." We walked to the parking garage. Edward tossed his bag in my trunk and settled into the passenger seat. "Ritz-Carlton?" I asked. "Unless you have a better suggestion." I pulled onto 101 North. Morning traffic was building the usual crawl toward the city. Edward sat quietly for a few minutes, looking out at the bay. "Tell me where we are," he said finally. "Not emotionally, tactically. What do we know?" I gave him the summary: Martin's forensic report, Christopher's real identity, the 4 previous victims, Diane's emails proving complicity, Stephanie's role with SW Ventures, the Wednesday deadline, the Friday gala. Edward listened occasionally, asking specific questions about amounts, timelines, account numbers. By the time I finished, we were crossing the Bay Bridge, San Francisco's skyline rising ahead of us. "The gala is interesting," Edward said. "How so?" "It's arrogance. They think they've already won, so they're celebrating before the game's over." He turned to look at me. That's when people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind where they stop being careful, where they assume everyone around them is either fooled or powerless." He paused. "We can use that." I navigated through morning traffic toward Nob Hill, pulling up to the Ritz-Carlton's valet entrance. "Give me an hour to check in and shower," Edward said, grabbing his bag. "Then we'll get breakfast and start planning. Rachel's flying in this afternoon. The lawyer I told you about specializes in fraud cases." "Edward, I can't thank you enough." "Don't." He cut me off gently. "You flew to Hong Kong when my mother died. You sat with me at her funeral. You don't thank Family Douglas. You just show up." He disappeared into the hotel. I sat in my car for a moment, engine idling. My phone buzzed. Text from Diane. "Good morning. Can we meet at Blue Bottle this afternoon, 2 p.m.? I really think we need to talk." I stared at that message. About what? About how she was going to institutionalize me tomorrow. My phone rang. Edward from his room. "Did Diane text you?" "How did you?" "Because that's what manipulators do. They sense when their target is pulling away, so they reach out." "What did she say?" I read him the message. "Don't meet her," Edward said immediately. "Not today. We need more time to prepare. Make an excuse. She'll push back. Let her. The more she pushes, the more desperate she looks. Douglas, trust me, when someone's planning to destroy you on Wednesday, you don't have coffee with them on Tuesday." He was right. I texted Diane, "Can't today. Work emergency, maybe later this week." Her response came within seconds. "Is everything okay? You seem distant lately." I didn't answer that one. Another text followed, "Tomorrow, then." "We need to talk about your health, Douglas. I'm worried." There it was. the dementia narrative being reinforced, making sure I knew she was concerned. I typed, "I'm fine. Just busy." Sent it, turned off my phone. Then I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and waited for Edward to call when he was ready. Outside the window, San Francisco moved through its Tuesday morning cable cars, delivery trucks, people hurrying to jobs and appointments, and lives that made sense. Mine didn't make sense anymore. But that was okay. By Friday it would. One way or another. Edward's suite at the Ritz-Carlton occupied a corner of the 18th floor with views stretching from the Bay Bridge to Golden Gate Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows, cream-colored furniture, elegant neutrality that cost a fortune. Rachel Hoffman was already there when I arrived at 10. She stood by the window holding coffee, dressed in a charcoal blazer and slacks. Mid-40s dark hair, pulled back sharp eyes that assessed me in 3 seconds. "Douglas Warren," she said, extending her hand. "Rachel Hoffman. Edwards told me the situation." Her grip was firm, direct. "Thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet. This is complicated." She gestured to the dining table where Edward had spread out Martin's forensic report. "Let's go through what we have." For the next hour, we dissected the evidence. Rachel moved through Martin's report with practiced efficiency, asking questions that cut straight to the core. Who had direct account access? What documents existed with my signature? How was Stephanie's involvement documented? Edward occasionally interjected with observations from his Hong Kong cases, patterns of fraud methods of asset recovery. "The Wednesday deadline is the pivot point," Rachel said finally. "They're planning something specific, probably a legal maneuver, power of attorney conservatorship, something that gives them control while appearing legitimate." "The nursing home," I said. "Exactly. Once you're institutionalized, even temporarily, they can argue you're incompetent." She looked at me directly. "We need to prevent Wednesday from happening according to their plan." "How?" "Several options. We could go to police now. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, there's enough for an investigation. But investigations take time. If Christopher gets spooked, he disappears. You've seen his history." She paused. "There's another approach. Document everything, gather more evidence, then choose our moment to strike." "What kind of moment?" Edward asked. "One where all the players are in one place, where exposure is immediate and public." "The gala," I said quietly. Rachel nodded. "Friday night. If he's planning to flee after that anyway, it's his last public appearance. Everyone's there, Diane, Stephanie, Christopher." She leaned back. "That's when you act." "What do we need between now and Friday?" Edward asked. "More documentation," Rachel said. "If Diane tries to get you to sign something, anything, we need to record it. California is 2-party consent for recordings, but if she's attempting coercion or fraud, that changes things. Record any conversation where she pressures you." "How?" "Phone in your pocket, voice recorder app. Just don't announce it." She pulled out her phone. "The key is capturing her tactics. Threats, manipulation, false statements about your mental state." "What if she doesn't contact me before Friday?" "She will," Edward said. "Wednesday is her deadline. If you keep avoiding her, she'll escalate. That's when people make mistakes." Rachel nodded. "The more pressure she's under, the sloppier she gets." My phone buzzed. Email from Martin. Subject line, urgent. I opened it. Found something critical. "Christopher has 2 flight bookings. Singapore Airlines SQ32 departing Friday, November 45 p.m. and backup Cathay Pacific to Hong Kong Saturday morning. He's planning multiple escape routes. Call me immediately." I showed the email to Edward and Rachel. 2 flights, Rachel said. "That's sophisticated. Most cons book one and run. He's planning for contingencies. Which means Friday is definitely his exit, Edward added. After the gala, he disappears. I looked at the timestamp. 10:47 a.m. Martin had sent this while we'd been planning. Time was running faster than I'd thought. Wednesday was tomorrow. Friday was 3 days away. And Christopher had 2 ways out of the country. We needed to move faster. Thank you for staying with Douglas's journey to this point. Now I'm curious, comment below and share what you expect will happen when the FBI moves in. Will it go smoothly, or do you sense another twist coming? Your instincts might surprise you. Fair warning, what follows contains dramatized fictional details designed to heighten the storytelling experience. If you prefer purely factual content, you're welcome to stop watching here. Wednesday morning started in Rachel's office in the financial district. She'd rented a small conference room where we could talk privately. Whiteboard on one wall. Windows overlooking Montgomery Street where people hurried to work, oblivious to the conspiracy unfolding above them. Recording in California requires 2-party consent, Rachel said, pacing in front of the whiteboard. But there are exceptions. Coercion, fraud, extortion. If someone is threatening you or attempting to obtain something through false pretenses, the consent requirement shifts. So I can record Diane. You can. But we need to be strategic. She drew a diagram on the whiteboard. What matters most is capturing her tactics, the threats, the manipulation, any false statements about your mental capacity. What if she notices? Then you tell her you're documenting the conversation for your records. Her objection itself becomes evidence of intent. Rachel handed me her phone. This has a recording app that timestamps everything and backs up to cloud storage automatically. Put it on the table during your conversation. Set it down casually. I took the phone, feeling its weight. When will she come? Rachel asked. She texted this morning. 6 p.m. tonight to discuss some important papers. Good. That gives us time to set up. She pulled out a digital recorder disguised as a pen. Keep this in your shirt pocket. Backup recording in case the phone fails. We spent another hour going over scenarios, practicing responses. By noon, I felt as prepared as I could be. Edward met me for lunch at a quiet restaurant in North Beach. We didn't talk about the plan. Instead, we talked about Shanghai, about buildings we'd designed, about that time we'd gotten lost in Chengdu. Normal memories. Reminders that life had been good once and could be good again. At 5:30, I returned home. Our Victorian and Pacific Heights looked the same as always. Cream-colored facade bay windows, the front garden Diane never maintained. I'd spent 2 decades making this house perfect. Now it felt like a trap. I set up Rachel's phone on the side table in the living room, angled to capture the sofa. Then I clipped the pen recorder to my shirt pocket. Tested both devices. Clear audio. At 5:58 p.m., the front door opened. Douglas, Diane's voice echoed through the hallway. I'm here. She appeared carrying a leather portfolio, dressed in a cream blouse and dark slacks, the outfit she wore when she wanted to look trustworthy, professional, concerned. Hi, I said, standing. Can I get you anything? No, thank you. Let's just sit and talk. She settled onto the sofa, placing the portfolio on the coffee table. I've been worried about you. You've been so distant this week. I've had a lot on my mind. I know. That's what I want to talk about. She opened the portfolio and pulled out a thick document. Douglas, I've been consulting with experts, doctors, lawyers, financial advisors about the best way to handle what we're both seeing. What we're both seeing, your memory problems, the confusion. Last week you forgot where your wallet was. 2 weeks ago you couldn't remember our anniversary dinner. I hadn't forgotten my wallet. I'd left it in my car deliberately, And our anniversary was in September. There was no anniversary dinner to remember. But I didn't correct her. Rachel's voice echoed. Let her talk. Let her build her case. I'm just getting older, I said carefully. It's more than that. Diane leaned forward, her face arranged in concern. I've talked to Christopher. You remember Christopher, my friend, who helps families with estate planning, and he thinks we need to be proactive. There it was. Christopher entering the conversation. Proactive how? By making sure your assets are protected, that you're protected. She slid the document across the coffee table. This is a post-nuptial agreement. It transfers your accounts into a family trust that I would manage on your behalf. That way, if your condition deteriorates further, everything is already organized. I picked up the document. 27 pages of legal language that probably added up to Diane taking complete control of everything I owned. This seems extreme, I said. It's not extreme. It's loving. She reached across and took my hand. Her skin was cold. Douglas, I know this is hard to hear, but you're not as sharp as you used to be. I see it every day, and I love you too much to watch you struggle. This trust protects you, protects us. What if I don't want to sign it? Her expression shifted just slightly, just for a second, before the concern mask slid back into place. Then you're putting both of us at risk. If something happens, if you make a bad decision with your money, or if someone takes advantage of you, we could lose everything. Is that what you want? No, but. Then sign it. Let me take care of this. Let me take care of you. She pulled a pen from her purse. Christopher has already reviewed it. It's all standard language. You just need to sign on the last page. Christopher had reviewed it. Of course he had. Probably wrote most of it. What about Stephanie? Does she know about this? Stephanie and I have discussed it. She agrees this is the right thing to do. She's worried about you too, Douglas. We all are. The recording devices capturing every word, the weight of 20 years pressing down. I don't know, I said. This feels rushed. It's not rushed. We've been dealing with this for months. Her voice took on an edge, frustration bleeding through. Douglas, you're not thinking clearly. That's exactly why we need this trust. You need someone to make good decisions for you because you can't make them yourself anymore. There it was, the explicit statement that I was incompetent. I let silence stretch between us. What if I want to wait? I asked finally. Talk to my own lawyer. Your lawyer. She laughed, sharp, dismissive. Douglas, you don't have a lawyer. You haven't worked in 3 years. Who would you even call? Margaret? Your sister isn't a lawyer. She's a retired teacher who doesn't understand finance. Diane stood up, pacing to the window. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're not thinking rationally. You're clinging to this idea that you're still capable of managing your own affairs when clearly you're not. She turned back to face me. Sign the document, Douglas. Sign it now, or I'll have to take other steps. What other steps? Steps I don't want to take. But if you force my hand. She left the threat hanging. The room felt smaller. Diane with her fake concern and her 27-page document. The recording devices capturing everything. I picked up the pen she'd offered, looked at the signature line on page 27, and I signed. My hand was steady. My signature looked exactly like it always had. Diane's shoulders relaxed. Thank you. I know that was hard, but you made the right choice. She gathered up the document, tucking it back into her portfolio. Then she crossed to where I sat and kissed my forehead, gentle, condescending, the way you'd kiss a child who'd finally stopped throwing a tantrum. I love you, she said. I'm doing this because I love you. She left at 6:43 p.m., 43 minutes. The entire conversation captured on 2 devices. I sat there for 5 minutes after the door closed, listening to the house settle around me. Then I stood up, retrieved Rachel's phone from the side table, and stopped the recording. The file uploaded automatically to cloud storage. Time-stamped. Verified. I called Rachel. "It's done," I said. "I have everything." And 43 minutes of her threatening me, lying about my mental state, and coercing me to sign over control of my assets. Perfect. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. That's exactly what we needed. Tomorrow morning we take this to the FBI. I hung up and sat in the growing darkness of my living room. Tomorrow was Thursday. One day until the gala. One day until Christopher's escape to Singapore. But tonight I had evidence that would bring all of them down. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. a.m. sharp. Edward, Rachel, and I walked through the security checkpoint at the FBI's San Francisco field office on Golden Gate Avenue. The building was all concrete and glass brutalist architecture that said federal authority without subtlety. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed. Agents moved through hallways with purpose. We were escorted to a conference room on the 3rd floor where Special Agent Karen Morrison was waiting. She was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, eyes that assessed us with practiced sharpness. Navy blazer over a white shirt, FBI credentials clipped to her belt. "Mr. Warren," she said, standing to shake my hand. "Special Agent Morrison, thank you for coming in." Her grip was firm, professional. "This is Edward Brown and Rachel Hoffman," I said. Morrison nodded. "Please sit. I've reviewed the preliminary materials Ms. Hoffman sent yesterday. You're here voluntarily to report suspected fraud." "Yes." "And you understand anything you tell me may be used in a criminal investigation?" "I understand." "Good. Start from the beginning. When did you first become aware something was wrong?" So I told her. Hakkasan restaurant. The Mandarin conversation. Discovering $2.8 million missing. Martin's forensic investigation. Christopher's real identity as Christian Blackwell. Diane's emails proving coordination. Stephanie's role with SW Ventures, LLC, the Wednesday coercion attempt. Morrison took notes, occasionally pausing for clarifying questions. What exact words had Diane used? What time had each transfer occurred? Rachel supplemented with legal analysis, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy statutes violated. Edward provided context from Hong Kong cases, explaining how the offshore routing suggested professional expertise. After 90 minutes, Morrison leaned back. "Christian Blackwell," she said. "Chukioka, we've been looking for him since 2022. Federal charges out of Denver, wire fraud, identity theft. Same pattern you're describing. Targets wealthy individuals through family members, drains accounts, disappears." "How many victims?" I asked. "4 confirmed. Probably more who never reported it." She pulled up a mugshot on her laptop, Christopher looking slightly younger, less polished. "He's good at vanishing. Multiple aliases, moves frequently, always one step ahead. Until now." "What happens next?" Rachel asked. Morrison closed her laptop. "Based on the evidence forensics emails recorded coercion, we have probable cause for arrest warrants. All 3 Christian Blackwell, Diane Warren, and Stephanie Warren." Hearing their names like that formal criminal made it real. "When?" Edward asked. "Normally we'd execute immediately. But given Blackwell has a flight Friday night and this gala..." Morrison looked at me. "Now Friday evening lets us catch all 3 together in a public setting. Harder for Blackwell to run when he's surrounded by 200 witnesses. And we'd prevent his Singapore flight." So you'll arrest them at the gala, I said quietly. If you're comfortable with that. It means waiting 30 hours, which is a risk. But strategically, it's our best chance to get all three simultaneously. She paused. However, this is your case, Mr. Warren. If you want us to move now, we will. I looked at Edward, then Rachel. Edward gave a slight nod. Rachel's expression said your choice. I thought about Friday night, the Fairmont, Christopher giving his speech about family values, Diane in her perfect dress, Stephanie playing concerned daughter, all of them performing for an audience that had no idea. Friday, I said. Let them have their moment, then take it away. Morrison nodded. We'll have agents positioned throughout the venue. Plain clothes. You won't know they're there until we move. Arrests will be quick and clean. What should I do? Act normal. Go to the gala. Let everything proceed as planned. When we're ready, we'll handle the rest. She stood, extending her hand. Mr. Warren, what they did to you, what Blackwell's been doing for over a decade, it ends Friday night. We shook hands. 20 minutes later, I stood on the sidewalk outside the federal building, blinking in late morning sunlight. Edward put a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I don't know. I looked up at the building's facade. In 24 hours, my wife and daughter will be arrested. Everything I built for 20 years will be gone. And I should feel something, but I just feel empty. That's normal, Rachel said gently. You're grieving who you thought they were. Yeah. Edward squeezed my shoulder. Come on, lunch. Then tonight you stay at the Ritz. No arguments. You're not spending the night before the gala alone in that house. I didn't argue. We walked toward Chinatown, heading into the last day before everything changed. Thursday evening, 5:47 p.m. My phone rang while I was sitting in Edward's suite at the Ritz-Carlton. Edward was on a call with Martin. Rachel had gone back to her office. I'd been staring out the window at city lights beginning to flicker on, trying not to think about tomorrow. Stephanie's name appeared on my screen. I answered on the third ring. Hi, sweetheart. Dad. Her voice sounded tight, nervous. I'm glad you picked up. Are you coming to the gala tomorrow? There it was, the real reason for the call. I'm planning on it, I said carefully. Good. That's good. Relief flooded her voice. It means a lot to Mom, to both of us. It's been hard lately, you know, with everything. What everything? Dad, come on. She sighed, frustrated but patient. The forgetfulness, the confusion. We're just trying to help. The forgetfulness, the confusion. Diane's narrative repeated so often that Stephanie had internalized it completely. Stephanie. I know it's hard to admit. Nobody wants to accept they're not as sharp as they used to be. But Dad, we've all noticed. The way you repeat yourself, the things you forget. I'm just getting older, I said. It's more than that. That's why Christopher's been helping Mom figure out the best way to make sure you're taken care of. Her voice softened. He's really good at this, Dad. Helping families navigate these situations. Mom says he's been amazing. Christopher, the man who'd stolen nearly $3 million. The man with 4 previous victims and an FBI warrant. The man fleeing the country in 36 hours. Amazing. What exactly has Christopher been helping with? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The trust paperwork, making sure everything's organized. Mom showed me the documents you signed yesterday. That was the right thing to do. It protects you. Protects all of us. She really believed it. Every word. Diane had done such a thorough job that my own daughter was convinced I was losing my mind. Part of me wanted to tell her the truth right then. About Hakkasan. About Martin's investigation. about Christopher's real identity, about the FBI waiting tomorrow. But I couldn't risk it. If Stephanie warned Diane, if Diane warned Christopher, he'd run. Everything would fall apart. So I swallowed the truth. I appreciate that you're looking out for me. We love you, Dad. I know sometimes it might not feel that way, but we do. Tomorrow night it's going to be nice. Good food, nice people, Christopher's giving a speech. Just a normal family evening. Normal. I'll be there, I said. Promise. Promise. Okay. She sounded genuinely relieved. 6:30 at the Fairmont, right? 6:30. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. She hung up. I sat there holding my phone, staring at her name on the screen until it faded to black. Edward had finished his call. He looked at me from across the room. Stephanie. Yeah. How bad? She believes it. All of it. The dementia, the trust, Christopher helping. I set my phone down. Diane's convinced her I'm losing my mind. Maybe she is a victim then, manipulated. Maybe. I walked to the window. Or maybe she's just better at lying to herself than Diane is. Edward joined me. Tomorrow night you'll know for sure. That's what I'm afraid of. What, that she's guilty or innocent? Both. If she's guilty, I've lost my daughter to greed. If she's innocent, I've lost her to Diane's manipulation. Either way, she's gone. Edward didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Outside, San Francisco moved through its Thursday evening traffic lights, people living lives that made sense. Mine would make sense again after tomorrow, one way or another. Friday, March 22nd, 6 o'clock a.m. The day had arrived. I'd barely slept. I'd spent the night at the Ritz-Carlton, in the guest room of Edward's suite, lying awake watching fog drift past the windows. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw tomorrow playing out the Fairmont Ballroom, Christopher's speech, FBI agents moving through the crowd, handcuffs clicking shut. At 6, I gave up pretending and got up. Edward was already awake, drinking coffee in the sitting area. He handed me a cup without saying anything. Some things didn't need words. At 7:15, my phone buzzed. Text from Edward, even though he was sitting 10 feet away. Ready when you are. I smiled despite everything. 8:30. Margaret. See you tonight, little brother. I'm proud of you. 10 o'clock. Rachel F.B. I confirms agents positioned throughout venue. Everything's set. Stay calm and let it play out. Then, at 11 a.m., the message I'd been expecting. Diane, looking forward to tonight. Wear the navy suit, you look handsome in it. I love you. I love you. 3 words she'd said thousands of times over 20 years. 3 words that had meant something once, before I'd learned they were just another tool in her arsenal. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to my house in Pacific Heights one last time. Showered, shaved, put on the navy suit, not because Diane had asked, but because I wanted to look like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. At 5:30 p.m., I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my tie. Tonight, the truth came out. Tonight, everything ended. Tonight, I stopped being the fool and became something else entirely. At 6:30 p.m., Edward and Margaret met me at my house. Edward wore a dark suit that looked Hong Kong tailored. Margaret had dressed in elegant navy, a color that said, "I'm here to witness something important," without drawing attention. You ready? Edward asked. I looked at my Victorian one last time, the house I'd renovated with my own hands, where I'd believed I was building a life instead of being systematically dismantled. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. We walked. The Fairmont Hotel was 3 blocks away up the steep incline of California Street, where cable cars rattled past. The evening was cool fog beginning its invasion from the Pacific City lights starting their performance. Margaret linked her arm through mine as we climbed. You know what Mom used to say before big moments. Hold your head up. You're a Warren. Exactly. She squeezed my arm. Tonight you show them what a Warren looks like when you back him into a corner. The Fairmont rose ahead, white marble and gold trim, and old San Francisco money. Doormen in burgundy uniforms opened brass doors. Inside the lobby stretched out in chandelier-lit opulence. We followed signs to the grand ballroom on the second floor. The ballroom was magnificent. High ceilings with gold leaf molding, crystal chandeliers hanging like frozen waterfalls, round tables dressed in white linens, each seating 8 arranged in rows radiating from a raised stage. The stage had a podium, microphones, and a large projection screen. 500 people, Rachel had estimated. At least 300 were already present, men in dark suits, women in cocktail dresses, the particular frequency of conversation that happened when everyone was trying to sound important. Waiters circulated with wine. A string quartet played classical music. Everything communicated one message. This is where money feels good about itself. I scanned the room systematically. There near the center, at a VIP table, Diane. She wore red. Deep crimson fitted perfectly. Her hair was styled in effortless-looking waves. Her makeup was flawless. She was laughing, her diamond bracelet catching chandelier light. The bracelet I'd bought her for our 15th anniversary. With money she'd been stealing for 2 months. Stephanie sat beside her in a black cocktail dress that was elegant but uncertain. She wasn't laughing. She was checking her phone, shoulders tight with tension. Nervous, guilty, anxious. And there, moving between tables like a politician, shaking hands with practiced ease, Christopher Blake, Christian Blackwell. FBI's most wanted. The man who'd stolen nearly $3 million from me and planned to be on a plane to Singapore in 5 hours. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, burgundy silk tie, Italian leather shoes polished to mirrors. His hair had just enough gray to suggest wisdom, just enough black to suggest vitality. He moved through the crowd like water, natural, inevitable, leaving no resistance. I watched him for a full minute before he noticed me. When he did, his face transformed with calculated warmth. He excused himself and walked straight toward us with absolute confidence. Douglas Warren? He extended his hand, smile reaching his eyes. Christopher Blake, I've heard so much about you from Diane. Wonderful to finally meet in person. His grip was firm, professional, the handshake of someone who knew how to manufacture trust in 3 seconds. Christopher, I said, matching his tone. Diane's mentioned you. All good things, I hope. That practiced laugh. I've been helping your family with estate planning. Complex stuff, but important. Especially as we get older and want everything organized for the people we love. The people we love. He said it like he meant it. This is Edward Brown, I said. An old friend from Shanghai, and my sister Margaret Walsh. Christopher shook both their hands with the same calculated warmth. Shanghai, fascinating. I've always wanted to spend real time there. I'm sure you'll find it interesting, Edward said, voice perfectly neutral. And Margaret, lovely to meet you. Diane's told me what a close family you are. Margaret smiled politely but said nothing. Christopher glanced toward Diane's table. Well, I should finish making rounds. But Douglas, your seat is table 3 right up front. We wanted you to have a good view of everything. A front row seat to my own humiliation. Thank you, I said. Christopher smiled and moved on. Margaret waited until he was gone. That's him. That's him. He looks so normal, That's what makes him good, Edward said quietly. If he looked dangerous, no one would trust him. I scanned again, looking for FBI. There by the bar, a woman in a dark pantsuit nursing wine. S.A. Karen Morrison. She caught my eye for half a second, nodded slightly, then looked away. Near the left exit, a man in a server's uniform, but his movements were wrong posture, too alert. At a back table, another man pretending to read the program, but watching Christopher. 3 agents I could identify. Rachel said there'd be at least 6. Let's find our seats, I said. Table 3 was front and center, place cards and calligraphy. Mine between Edward and Margaret. Diane had planned that keep me surrounded by family maintain appearances. Other guests continued arriving. At 7:15, the lights dimmed slightly. A woman in silver took the stage and welcomed everyone. She thanked sponsors and talked about family support services. I wasn't listening. My attention was on Christopher, Diane, and the FBI agents. Dinner was served. Chicken with vegetables and sauce. Wine. I ate because not eating would look strange, but I tasted nothing. Across the room, Diane laughed at something Christopher said. Stephanie picked at her food. Christopher worked nearby tables building his persona. At 7:30 exactly, the woman in silver returned. And now I'd like to introduce someone instrumental in organizing tonight's event. A man dedicated to helping families navigate caring for aging loved ones. Please welcome Christopher Blake. Applause filled the ballroom. Christopher rose, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the stage with practiced confidence. He took the podium, adjusted the microphone, let the applause fade. Then he smiled. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. His voice was perfect, smooth, the kind that made people lean forward. When Diane Warren approached me 6 months ago about organizing this event, I was honored. Because this cause, supporting families as they navigate the difficult journey of aging, is something I've seen too many families struggle with alone. He paused. How many of you know what it's like watching someone you love struggle with memory loss, with confusion, with gradual loss of independence? It's heartbreaking, it's exhausting, and it's a journey no family should face without support. Heads nodded. Some women dabbed their eyes. That's why tonight's programs are vital. They provide resources, counseling, guidance for families doing incredibly difficult, often invisible work. He gestured toward Diane's table. Diane Warren is a perfect example. She's been navigating this journey with her husband, Douglas, who's here tonight, and it hasn't been easy. But Diane has approached it with such grace, such patience, such dedication. I felt 300 pairs of eyes shift toward me, sympathetic, pitying. The old man with the failing mind. Christopher continued, his voice taking on emotional weight. That's what tonight is about. Honoring the caregivers, the family members who sacrifice their time and energy to make sure their loved ones are cared for with dignity. He paused, appearing moved. So, to everyone here caring for an aging parent, a spouse, a family member, thank you. You're heroes, every single one of you. The applause was building. People were standing. Christopher let it wash over him, his face arranged in humble gratitude. When it finally began to fade, he looked down at his notes, then back up at the crowd, with what appeared to be a spontaneous idea crossing his face. You know what, before I finish, I'd like to do something a bit unconventional. That smile again. Douglas Warren is here tonight, and I think it would be wonderful if he could say a few words. Share his perspective on what it means to have people around you who care. He looked directly at me, extending his hand in invitation. Douglas, would you come up here and say a few words to these wonderful people? The room erupted in encouraging applause, warm, supportive, the kind you gave to someone you felt sorry for. At Diane's table, her face went completely white. Her mouth opened slightly. This wasn't part of the plan. Christopher had gone completely off script. I stood up slowly like an old man might. Edward caught my eye across the table. The slightest nod. "You've got this." Margaret squeezed my hand one last time under the table. "Make them pay." The applause continued as I walked toward the stage, taking measured steps, keeping my face carefully neutral, not confused, not sharp, just somewhere in that uncertain middle ground. Christopher stepped aside as I reached the podium, gesturing with both hands like a generous host, his smile saying, "Aren't I kind," giving this poor old man his moment. The ballroom was watching me now. 500 faces. Waiting. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, crossed to the podium, and reached for the microphone. "Good evening," I said in Mandarin, my voice clear and strong, carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. "I want to tell you a story about trust and betrayal." The Chinese businessmen in the audience shifted forward in their seats, surprised to hear their language spoken so fluently by someone who looked like just another American. I continued in Mandarin. 23 years ago, I arrived in Shanghai as a young architect. I didn't speak your language. I didn't understand your culture. But over 10 years, I learned. I built 17 buildings with Chinese partners. I learned to dream in Mandarin, and 10 days ago, that knowledge saved my life. I gestured toward Diane's table where she sat, frozen, her face draining of color. Because 10 days ago at Hakkasan Restaurant on Grant Avenue, I sat across from my wife and daughter while they planned my destruction in Mandarin. Every word, every detail. They believed I was ignorant. They were catastrophically wrong. Now I switched to English, my voice hardening. For everyone who doesn't speak Chinese, here's what you need to know. The man who just spoke so eloquently about family values is a fraud. His name isn't Christopher Blake. It's Christian Blackwell. And the FBI has been hunting him for 12 years. The screen behind me came alive with Martin's carefully prepared evidence. Christopher's mugshot filled the display, younger, different hair, but unmistakably him. This man has destroyed 5 families before mine. Let me introduce you to his victims. The first victim's face appeared. Chloe Davis, Portland, Oregon, 2012. Christian spent 6 months befriending her daughter at a yoga studio, presenting himself as a wealth management consultant. He gained access to Chloe's retirement accounts through forged power of attorney documents. When he disappeared to the Philippines, $685,000 went with him. Chloe was 62. She lost her home. She now lives in her daughter's spare bedroom, working part-time at a grocery store, because her retirement is gone. The room was completely silent except for my voice. Jason Vance, Seattle, Washington, 2015. Christian met Jason's son at a networking event, convinced them he was a financial advisor with proprietary offshore strategies. $520,000 vanished into Singapore banks. Jason was 68. 3 months after discovering the theft, he had a massive heart attack. His doctor said the stress killed him. Jason's photograph showed a kind-faced grandfather who'd trusted the wrong person. Patricia Monroe, Denver, Colorado, 2018. Christian approached her at a charity fundraiser as a trust restructuring specialist. He spent 8 months convincing Patricia and her daughter that traditional trust funds were tax inefficient. He stole $890,000 through shell companies and cryptocurrency. Patricia was 70. She recovered only $140,000 after 2 years of legal battles. She now works 3 days a week bagging groceries to pay rent. Patricia's exhausted face looked out at the crowd. Michael Torres, Los Angeles, California, 2020. Christian infiltrated Michael's family through his grandson posed as an elder care financial planner. He forged documents giving himself power of attorney. $730,000 disappeared into Vancouver accounts. Michael was 73. He's now in a state facility because his family can't afford private care. He doesn't remember his grandson's name anymore. I let those stories hang in the air for 3 seconds. 4 victims, 4 destroyed lives, $2,825,000 stolen, and then Christian came for me. The screen switched to my bank statements. February 3rd, $950,000 transfers from my account to SW Ventures LLC, a company that didn't exist until February 1st. The managing member of this shell company, my daughter Stephanie Warren. I pointed at Stephanie, who was openly weeping now. She signed every document. She opened the corporate bank account. The money went through SW Ventures and disappeared into Hong Kong accounts the same day. Wire transfer confirmations scrolled across the screen. February 10th, $720,000 routed through 3 intermediary banks to the Cayman Islands. The kind of sophisticated layering that takes years to perfect. Christian has had 12 years of practice. February 17th, $830,000 to Stephanie's personal checking account, labeled as a gift. Except the signature authorizing that gift isn't mine. It's a forgery. And over 6 weeks, another $300,000 in transfers small enough to avoid automatic fraud detection. $15,000 here, $30,000 there. Death by 1,000 cuts. Email exchanges appeared on the screen. He's asking about the missing transactions. I told him the bank made errors. He accepted it. We're clear to proceed. Diane, January 8th. Second transfer tomorrow. Keep him distracted. Maybe suggest he see a doctor about his memory. Christian, February 9th. After Wednesday's signing, we control everything. The house, the Schwab account, all of it. Then we're done with this charade. Diane, February 16th. People were reading the truth sinking in with every word. My wife coordinated every detail. She wasn't manipulated. She wasn't deceived. She was Christian's partner. She built a false narrative about my declining mental health. She told family members I was forgetting things. She created a medical history that didn't exist. Diane's face was buried in her hands, perfect makeup streaking. Wednesday, she arrived at my house with a 27-page post-nuptial agreement. She used every manipulation technique Christian had taught her. For 43 minutes, she told me I was confused, incompetent, unable to manage my own affairs. I signed the document, because every word of those 43 minutes is recorded. Every threat, every lie, every moment of coercion. I turned to face Christopher directly. And tonight, Christian Blackwell planned his final act. Singapore Airlines Flight SQ-32, departing at 11:45 p.m. first class. One-way ticket. In 4 hours, he'd be in a country with no extradition treaty, with nearly $3 million of my dollars added to his collection. The flight reservation filled the screen. Seat assignment. Confirmation number. One way. But he made one critical mistake. He underestimated a 72-year-old architect who learned Mandarin in Shanghai. That's when the doors exploded open. A young woman burst through late 20s, dark hair, wild face streaked with tears, wearing jeans and an oversized sweatshirt that couldn't hide her 7-month pregnant belly. "Christopher Blackwell!" She screamed, her voice raw. The ballroom froze. She stormed down the center aisle, and I saw absolute fury in her eyes. You son of a bitch. You said you'd be at the ultrasound. You said you'd be there when she's born. You said we were getting married. Christopher looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Angela, I knew it had to be. Angela Smith climbed onto the stage with surprising agility for someone so pregnant. You took every dollar my grandmother left me, $340,000. She saved her entire life. You said it was for the baby's future. You said we'd buy a house together. She was in Christopher's face now, 7 months pregnant and absolutely fearless. I found your laptop 2 weeks ago. I saw everything. The flights, the bank accounts, the emails with her, she pointed at Diane, planning how to steal from her own husband while you were stealing from me and our daughter. Angela whirled toward Diane, tears streaming, but voice strong. Did you know he told me he loved me? Did you know he said we'd raise this baby together as a family? Or were you just another Mark who believed his lies? Diane opened her mouth, but no sound came out. You knew, Angela shouted. You knew about me. I saw the emails where he told you about the pregnant girlfriend, and you didn't care because you were too busy counting stolen money. The ballroom had descended into complete chaos. People standing, shouting, phones recording. Special Agent Karen Morrison stepped into the light badge held high. Christian Blackwell. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. FBI, you're under arrest. 4 agents materialized from the crowd. They'd been invisible all evening, positioned and waiting. Christopher bolted. He made it 3 steps before 2 agents tackled him professionally. No drama, just efficient law enforcement. Hands behind his back, handcuffs clicking shut. You have the right to remain silent. Morrison began, her voice practiced. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. This is a mistake, Christopher shouted. I'm Christopher Blake. I don't know who Christian Blackwell is. I'm a legitimate. You have multiple FBI warrants across 4 states. Morrison continued calmly. You have the right to an attorney. She turned to Diane, who'd started crying silent tears that destroyed her perfect makeup. Diane Warren, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, grand theft, and elder abuse under California Penal Code Section 368. Elder abuse. Diane's voice was barely audible. I didn't. You systematically coerced your spouse into signing legal documents while falsely claiming mental incompetence. That's textbook elder abuse. It carries a mandatory minimum sentence. Another agent moved forward with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Diane looked at me one final time, her eyes desperate, still trying to find some angle, some manipulation that would work. Douglas, please. After 20 years together, after everything we built nothing, I said quietly. You stole everything. They led her away, reading her rights as she went. Morrison approached Stephanie last, who was still sitting at the VIP table, sobbing into her hands like her world was ending. Stephanie Warren, you're under arrest for wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I didn't know, Stephanie cried out, looking up with red, swollen eyes. I swear I didn't understand. Mom said it was legal trust restructuring. She said Dad had approved everything. She said I was helping protect him. That's a conversation for your attorney, Morrison said, not unkindly. Right now you need to come with me. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. They cuffed Stephanie gently. She wasn't resisting, wasn't trying to flee, but the handcuffs still went on. The 3 of them were led out through different exits, Christopher still shouting protests. Nobody believed Diane, silent and pale as death. Stephanie crying like a child who just learned the world was crueler than she'd imagined. The ballroom was emptying rapidly. guests fleeing like the building was collapsing. Some stopped to stare. Most just wanted distance from the scandal. Angela Smith collapsed onto a chair on the stage, still crying, one hand protectively over her belly. I sat down beside her. "I have a forensic accountant," I said quietly. "Martin Fisher. He's very good at finding stolen money. I'll help you get your grandmother's money back, as much as we can recover." "Why would you help me?" Her voice broke. "Because Christian Blackwell destroys lives, and I'm going to help put every piece back together that I can." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you." Edward and Margaret appeared, flanking me like guards. "Time to go," Edward said gently. We walked out into the fog-wrapped San Francisco night. Behind us, the Fairmont buzzed with the biggest scandal it had seen in decades. Ahead, the city waited, indifferent, eternal, already moving on to its next drama. "What now?" I asked as we descended the steps to California Street. Edward smiled, tired but genuine. "Now we figure out who you are without her." "I think," I said slowly, feeling the truth of it as I spoke, "I already know." We walked down the hill as fog swallowed the chaos behind us. I was 72 years old. My marriage was over. My daughter might go to prison. My wife definitely would. And somehow, impossibly, walking through the cold San Francisco night with my best friend and my sister, I felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. Free. The weekend after the gala, I sat in Rachel's office reviewing the legal aftermath. Her conference room had become command central. Whiteboards with timelines, stacks of documents, coffee cups everywhere. Rachel sat across from me, reading glasses on, going through each case methodically. "Let's start with Christian Blackwell," she said. "Arraigned Monday in federal court. Wire fraud across state lines, identity theft, conspiracy forgery. Denied bail. The judge called him an extreme flight risk. How long? Federal guidelines put him at 15 to 20 years minimum, with his record and the number of victims closer to 20. He'll be 70 before he's free." 20 years. It didn't seem like enough, but it was something. Diane's arraignment was Tuesday. State charges grand theft, conspiracy, and elder abuse under California Penal Code 368. That last one carries mandatory minimums. What's her bail, 500,000. She hasn't posted. Still in county jail. Her accounts are frozen, and no bondsman will touch her. Rachel paused. She's going to plead. Her attorney reached out yesterday. 7 years with parole possibility after 5 if she cooperates fully. 7 years. Diane would be 65 when she got out. And Stephanie. Rachel's face softened. Arraigned Wednesday. Wire fraud conspiracy. Bail $250,000. Margaret posted it. Margaret did. She called Thursday. Said Stephanie is still your daughter, still her niece. Stephanie's living with Margaret now. House arrest, ankle monitor, court-mandated therapy. Do you think she understood what she was doing? Rachel removed her glasses. I think Diane manipulated her. I think she chose not to ask questions when things didn't add up. She's not innocent, but she's not Diane either. If she cooperates, shows remorse, probably suspended sentence, probation, restitution. She might not see prison, but she'll have a record. Yes, that doesn't go away. We moved to financial recovery. Martin's comprehensive report tracked every dollar. Rachel spread documents across the table. Good news, we've recovered most of it. Bad news, most isn't all. She pulled out the first summary. SW Ventures LLC. The account was frozen within 48 hours. $950,000 was still there. Blackwell hadn't moved it yet. Court order took 3 weeks, but it's back in your accounts. The Cayman transfer, $720,000 through 3 banks to Georgetown. Cayman authorities cooperated once we showed federal involvement. Took 5 weeks. You got it back Thursday. Stephanie's account, $830,000. Her account was frozen during arrest. Entire balance seized and returned within a week. Rachel's face shifted to something more somber. The smaller transfers are the problem. $300,000 over 6 weeks, moved in amounts under $10,000. Those went to multiple accounts, some we can't identify. She showed me the breakdown. Recovered $180,000 from Blackwell-controlled accounts. Lost $120,000. Cryptocurrency conversions, anonymous wallets. It's gone. Total recovered $2,680,000 of $2,800,000 stolen. You lost $120,000 we can't trace. 95% recovery. Better than most fraud victims. But that $120,000 represented the part of Christian Blackwell that would never face consequences. Angela Smith filed her complaint last week, Rachel continued. Confirmed 18 months together. He stole $340,000, her grandmother's entire inheritance. She's cooperating with the FBI. Martin's helping her pro bono found about $180,000 of her money. She might recover half. How is she? Struggling. 7 months pregnant, no money, no job. But her sister in San Jose is taking her in. Baby's due in June. I thought about Angela on that stage, pregnant and furious and brave. Edward knocked and entered with coffee. He'd been in the waiting room giving me space. How are we looking? He asked. 95% recovered. 3 people arrested. Angela's getting help. Which is why I want to talk about what comes next. Edward sat beside me. I'm supposed to fly back to Hong Kong next week, but I'm thinking I might stay a few months. You could use someone around who isn't a lawyer. Something unclench in my chest. I'd like that. Good. Because I've been thinking about something else. You and I built something good in Shanghai. What if we did it again? We're not in our 40s anymore, Edward. No, but we're not dead either. Something smaller. Consulting work. Brown Warren Consulting, helping businesses navigate between American and Chinese markets. The kind of work where our experience matters more than our age. It was tempting, a chance to build something new. Let me think about it, I said. Think fast. I'm not getting any younger. Edward smiled. And neither are you. 3 months passed. Christopher's trial was scheduled for September. Diane's plea deal went through 7 years. Stephanie's case was pending, her attorney building the manipulation defense, while she attended therapy twice a week. Angela had her baby in June, a girl 7 pounds 4 ounces healthy. She named her Grace. Martin recovered $195,000 of her inheritance. Not everything, but enough to start over. Margaret sent me photos weekly, Stephanie in the garden reading, slowly recovering. She looked younger, smaller, like she was finding who she'd been before Diane. In July, a letter arrived. Margaret's address, Stephanie's handwriting. Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you should. But my therapist says I need to try. I'm so sorry. Those words are too small for what I did, but they're all I have. I believed Mom when she said you were sick. I believed her when she said we were helping you. I believed because it was easier than asking questions I didn't want answered. That's not an excuse. That's just the truth. I signed those papers. I opened that account. Whether I understood what they meant or not, I'm responsible. I'm in therapy now, 3 times a week. Working through things I should have worked through years ago. Trying to figure out who I am when I'm not being who Mom wanted me to be. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. To be someone you might be proud of someday. I love you. I always have. Even when I was hurting you, I loved you. Stephanie, I read that letter 3 times. Put it in my desk drawer. Didn't throw it away. Didn't answer it either. Just held it. The way you hold something broken, you're not sure can be fixed, but aren't ready to discard. In late July, Edward called. I've been looking at office space in Pudong, near where we built the Lujiazui Tower. Thought maybe August you could come take a look. See if Shanghai still feels like home. I thought about my Victorian, about 20 years of marriage that turned out to be lies, about a daughter who might someday be someone I could know again. I thought about Shanghai, about the man I'd been there, about building things that lasted. Book the flight, I said. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Edward laughed. That's the Douglas I remember. I hung up and looked around my office, at blueprints from projects decades old, at photos of buildings I'd designed, at the life I'd built that had turned out to be something else. August in Shanghai. Maybe that's where I'd figure out who I was now. Not the man I'd been in my 40s. Not the fool who'd been conned. Someone new. Someone who'd survived. Someone who was finally ready to start building again. August 2024. I stood in Shanghai again for the first time in 23 years at the office of Brown Warren Consulting, the new company Edward and I had just launched. The office was small, 15th floor of a glass tower in Pudong overlooking the Huangpu River. 2 rooms, a conference table, computers. A coffee maker Edward had shipped from Hong Kong because he insisted Chinese coffee wasn't strong enough. Through the window, I could see the Oriental Pearl Tower, and beyond it the skyline I'd helped build. The Lujiazui Tower, the Jingan Complex. Buildings that had been dreams on paper when Edward and I were younger. You're staring again, Edward said from his desk. I'm remembering. Remember faster. Client call in 20 minutes. Brown Warren Consulting. Helping American businesses navigate Chinese markets. Helping Chinese businesses understand American regulations. The kind of work where our combined decades of experience actually mattered more than our age. We'd signed our first client 2 weeks ago, a tech startup in San Jose trying to understand Chinese manufacturing. Our second came 3 days later, a Shanghai textile company wanting American retail access, small projects. Nothing like the massive developments we'd built in the 90s, but real, necessary, ours. The city had transformed completely. Pudong had been farmland when I'd left. Now it was vertical glass and steel. But underneath the modernity, Shanghai was still Shanghai. The same rhythm, the same energy. It felt like home in a way San Francisco hadn't felt in years. My phone buzzed. Email from Rachel. Christopher Blackwell sentenced this morning. 18 years federal. No parole eligibility for 15. He'll be 80 before he walks free. 18 years. Christian would be an old man if he got out. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, just acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. Diane's plea deal finalized. 7 years state prison. Parole eligible after 5. She's been transferred to California Institution for Women. Margaret visited once. Said she looks 20 years older. 7 years. Diane would be 65 at her first parole hearing. The elegant woman in the red dress would emerge as someone completely different. Stephanie's trial scheduled for October, but I'm confident we'll get suspended sentence given her cooperation age psychological evaluation showing genuine remorse and evidence of manipulation. She'll have a record, but probably won't see prison. Margaret says she's doing better, working at a bookstore in Oakland. Therapy 3 times a week. She asks about you sometimes. Stephanie, working at a bookstore, going to therapy, asking about me. I thought about her letter still in my desk drawer in San Francisco. I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't know if I could forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I also couldn't hate her the way I hated Diane. She'd been 29, desperate for her mother's approval, convinced she was helping me. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it. And maybe eventually that would be enough. Angela Smith had her baby June 14th. Girl 7 pounds 4 ounces named Grace. Martin recovered $195,000 of her stolen money. She's living with her sister in San Jose, taking accounting classes online, working part-time. She sent her regards. Said to tell you thank you. Angela. 28 with a baby and half her inheritance gone, but alive, fighting, building something new. I replied to Rachel, thanks for the update. Keep me posted on Stephanie's case. Edward looked over. Everything okay? Christopher got 18 years, Diane got 7. Stephanie's trial is in October. How do you feel? I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. In Shanghai, in Shanghai. Edward smiled. Good. Because we're flying to Beijing next week for that contract meeting. We're actually doing this. We spent the next hour on Zoom with a North Carolina furniture company sourcing bamboo from Zhejiang province. Edward handled Chinese regulations. I handled American import requirements. Together we built a bridge they couldn't have built alone. This was the work now. Not skyscrapers. Not monuments. Just practical problems solved by 2 old men who'd learned a few things. It was enough. That evening, Edward and I walked to a restaurant near the Bund, the old colonial waterfront preserved like a museum to Shanghai's history. The restaurant was small, tucked into an alley. We ordered too much food, dumplings, noodles, whole fish steamed in ginger and scallions, cold beer. The kind of meal you had when you weren't trying to impress anyone. A waiter brought tea, jasmine fragrant, the cup warm between my hands. He spoke to us in Mandarin, asking if we needed anything else. We're good, I replied in Mandarin. Thank you. Edward smiled at me as the waiter left. You know you never really left Shanghai, did you? What do you mean? I mean you spent 20 years in San Francisco living like you were still here. Building things. Speaking Mandarin in your head. Keeping this part of yourself separate. He gestured around. You were always coming back. Just took you a while to figure it out. He was right. I'd left Shanghai in 2001 thinking I was moving forward, but I'd just been waiting. For the right reason, the right moment, the right catastrophe to burn down everything I'd built wrong so I could start again. Yeah, I said. I guess I never left. Edward smiled. Welcome home then. We finished our meal, paid, walked out into the warm Shanghai night. The city moved around us, bikes, cars, people, the constant flow of a place that never stopped becoming. I breathed it in. The pollution, the food smells, the river dampness, the particular scent of Shanghai. I was 72 years old. My marriage was over. My daughter might never forgive me for not forgiving her. My wife would spend the next 7 years in prison. And I was standing in Shanghai with my best friend about to build something new. Not perfect, not what I'd planned, but mine. Finally, completely honestly, mine. Come on, Edward said, starting toward the street. I want to show you this bar near People's Square. Worst cocktails you've ever tasted, but the owner tells the best stories. I followed him into the night, into the city I'd left, into the city I'd never really left. into the rest of my life. Home. Looking back, the greatest theft wasn't the $2.8 million. It was the 20 years I spent trusting without verifying, loving without seeing building on a foundation I never inspected. Don't be like me. Don't assume that because someone smiles at your table, they're not planning your destruction in another language. Don't let comfort blind you to red flags waving in front of your face. Don't wait until you're 72 and standing in ruins to finally ask the hard questions. Here's what I learned. Trust is earned through consistency, not declarations. Love without honesty is just performance. And silence, choosing not to verify, not to challenge, isn't peace. It's delayed catastrophe. God gave me the gift of language at 50 in Shanghai. I didn't know He was preparing me to save my own life 20 years later. Sometimes skills we think are irrelevant become exactly what we need when everything falls apart. God's timing isn't ours, but it's always purposeful. When I felt most alone, 2:47 a.m., discovering the theft, God had already positioned the people I'd need. Edward, Margaret, Martin, Rachel. I didn't see it then. Looking back, I see His hand in every connection, every moment of preparation. Now starting over at 72 in Shanghai, I see it again. God doesn't waste our pain. He uses it to rebuild us into something stronger, wiser, more aligned with who we were always meant to be. To anyone reading this, verify what you're told. Question what seems convenient. And remember, it's never too late to start over. Never too late to come home. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Drop a comment sharing which moment hit you hardest. I genuinely want to know your thoughts. If this story spoke to you, pass it along to someone who might need to hear it. The narratives that unsettle us often teach us most.